Hey folks, Brian here. I want to thank each and every one of you who has liked, reviewed, rated, and subscribed to Confessions of an Arcade Addict and telling your friends and everything like that. Please keep it going. I just recently went up over 500 likes on Facebook, and I'm really, really grateful to each and every one of you. Now on with the show.
I'm home. Welcome to the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast, an introspective look at video gaming from the classic era to the modern day. Now here is your host, Brian.
Hey folks, what's going on out there? Brian here, and this is episode number 28 of the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast. Let's see, in my neck of the woods, the coronavirus, of course, is ongoing. As we all know, some places in this country are worse off than others because our governor decided to take more of a precautionary measure. Things are not quite so bad up here, even though there are hot spots across the state. One of them from a friend of mine I talked to lives in Grand Rapids. That Grand Rapids is one of them. So but on a good note, my favorite place to go, the arcade in Brighton, they decided to do a soft launch starting on July 8th, starting on July 10th, which was this past Friday. It's now July 11th. They decided to do a soft launch, and of course they have different protocols in place to, mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. So I'll read directly off of their Facebook post, which was posted on Wednesday, the 8th of July. To quote, "Hello all. We'd like to announce that we'll be doing a soft opening this weekend. After many lifeless months, we're so happy to be able to power up the games and have you all back. To keep everyone as safe and healthy as possible while gaming, we will be implementing new protocols. Everyone's temperature will be taken upon entering, face masks will be required, social distancing will be in action, and we have placed hand sanitizing stations around the gaming floor. Employees will be wearing masks at all times and will be frequently disinfecting all games throughout the day. Face masks can be bought for $1 and gloves are complimentary upon arrival." See, that's how you do it. That's exactly how you do it. I mean, kudos to them. Hats off to them. They are doing this exactly right. Okay, to continue. At this time, we're only permitted to have 50% occupancy inside the building, about 63 people. So feel free to give us a ring at our phone number to check occupancy status for your safety before coming in. We brought in some amazing new games during our close time as well. You can find all the new additions, which includes a Luigi's Mansion sit-in game, a Stranger Things pinball machine, and many more in one of our previous posts. We thank you for your patience ahead of time, and we hope to see you soon. I immediately liked that statement. One of the things they got is a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles LE pinball machine, which is not cheap. Limited editions are really, really expensive. But they do get the newest pinball machines on a regular basis. I mean, like I've said before, and you'll hear it again when I do my arcade review, I love this place. Best arcade I've been to in a very long time, bar none. So, that's really good news. I'm probably going to wait a little while, maybe a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, until things may have quieted down a little bit more. I might even wait until probably September, I don't know yet. I may just get the bug. Oh, that's a bad pun. My apologies. I may just get the proverbial wild hair and just go up there and show up in mask with gloves on and to play the games because it's been that long. I mean, the last time I was at the arcade in Brighton was what, last week of February, I think, somewhere around there. I do have an on the road segment. I just can't remember what the date is. So yeah, I'm gonna go there, when I feel more comfortable about it. I mean, I feel bad for my my godson, who unfortunately, because of his medical issues, I wouldn't even dream about taking him to such a place in such a time. And of course, that's disappointing for him, but this is the world we live in now. I mean, yeah, and like I said, I'll have to be feeling a lot more comfortable than I am now to go up there, but we'll see how it goes. Let's see. Aside from that, I haven't been doing too much. Actually, I've been playing more Nova Drift. I've been playing Elite Dangerous, although I'm at a bit of a stopping point, shall I say. Basically, what it is that now that I finished grinding to get the one ship that I really wanted, which for those who play, that is a Imperial cutter. And it's a beautiful ship. That's one of the reasons why I bought it. Imperial ships are gorgeous. Those who play Elite Dangerous know what I'm talking about. They're ships that are much more effective for what you need them for, but what can I say? I like pretty ships. But anyway, aside from that, of course, I've been, watching my favorite streams on YouTube and, doing a little research for the show and so forth. But that's pretty much what's been going on with me. I did a check of emails and voicemails, nothing there. So once again, if you want to ask any questions about anything that I've spoken about in the previous 27 episodes, it's kind of hard to believe I've been doing it for this long. Yeah, I've been at this for 2 years now. This is ridiculous. Or if there's something that I have said about a game or game system or something along those lines that you may want to ask about or talk about, by all means, get a hold of me at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Also, there is a phone number for voicemails. That number is 734-743-2433. Also, I have social media up and running as we speak. On Facebook, you just search for Confessions of an Arcade Addict. It'll take you right to the page. There's also a group page for the podcast, and listeners can ask questions and commiserate amongst themselves or ask me questions. I do check that page every so often, so there's a strong Facebook presence. Also, I'm on Twitter. The nickname is at arcadeaddict_B. On Instagram, it is arcadeaddictbrian. And Tumblr is tumblr.com/blog/confessions of an arcade addict. So once again, there are plenty of ways to get a hold of the show. And if you are so inclined, by all means, I'm here. So, without any further ado, let's get right into the show. I got a little bit here to talk about, so let's get right into the meat of the show. And that would be Arcade Rundown.
Good morning, Mr. Phelps. Your mission, Jim, should you decide to accept it, is to make Stefan believe Townsend's information. As always, should you or any of your IM force be caught or killed, the Secretary will disavow any knowledge of your actions. This tape will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Good luck, Jim.
Arcade Rundown. Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum in Farmington Hills, Michigan. I didn't hear about Marvin's until I ran an internet search in 2017 for arcades in the greater Detroit area. This was probably about 5 to 6 months before I really started laying the groundwork to start this podcast. So, when I heard that there was a place up in the Farmington Hills / Novi area, which is kind of ironic because I work up there now. When I found out about this, I did a little more digging, and the reviews for the place were almost all positive. So one day I just decided to jump in my car and run up there and check it out. When I got there, it was not what I expected, in a good way though. The place is fascinating. I mean, you can go in there and walk around, and you spend a couple of hours in there and you will not find everything that they have on display. When I was giving an overview on the arcades in Michigan, way back in a previous episode, I said this place was like stepping into the Twilight Zone, but in a good way. And I still maintain that statement. You can spend, like I said, you can spend a lot of time just walking around and looking at the old-timey games and attractions. Some of them are dating all the way back in I want to say the 1920s, or at least they look like it. And it was just a wonderful experience. And of course, they do have arcade games, which is the main reason why I was there. I was just pleasantly surprised at what else was there. When it comes to the games, there aren't a lot of them, but the selection they have is decent. It's a really good cross-section. They do have more than a few pinball machines and video games, but there's a good representation of the classic arcade games and the newer Stern pinball machines. There are redemption games aplenty in this place, but they're not offensive in your face. One of the things that the management did that I think is really good is that they put the redemption games on one side of the arcade and the video games up front right by the door. I thought that was a really smart move on their part. The old school mechanical games and attractions are the star of the show here. Make no mistake about it. This place has had a history in the state of Michigan for years and years, from what I understand. I've seen posts on Facebook, and I do follow Marvin's on Facebook. There are people who've been going to this place since they were teenagers, and now they're in their 40s and 50s. So yeah, Marvin's has been around for quite some time. I mean, the place is really good. Do they not have a lot of machines? No, but considering there's so much else there to draw the eye and attract your attention, I'm more than willing to give it a pass. Of course, I'll be giving an arcade review of Marvin's coming soon, so stay tuned. I did go there, oh goodness, how long ago was it? It was I want to say it was late February, early March of 2019. And I do have some vocal notes from which I did my arcade review. And I think I was fair in my review, but, see for yourself. It's coming in an upcoming episode. I want to say that is episode 39. There will be a review for Marvin's in there. So, take a listen. If you agree, cool. If you don't agree, hey, get a hold of me. arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Tell me why. And of course, if you got any stories to share about your experience at Marvin's, good, bad, or indifferent, by all means, yeah, get a hold of me. Let me know, because I want to know. And I'll read your email on the show, and we'll go from there. All right. With Marvin's out of the way, let's move on to our next segment. Let's go into the top 10s. Top 10s. Arcade games of 1992. Okay, at this point, I'm 23 years old, and like I said in the top 10s for 1991, my arcade experiences are coming few and far between. Maybe every other month now. I'm hanging out with my gaming crew a little less, which kind of annoyed me at the time, even though there's nothing I could do about it. I mean, most of these dudes were younger guys. When I first met them, they were sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school. And, now that I'd been hanging out with them for a couple of years, a lot of them graduated. They were looking towards college. So we weren't getting together to, play D&D, to play Battletech, to play Shadowrun as much anymore. It was kind of depressing. I mean, and aside from that, like I've said, I'm not able to get out to Milford Rec very often, or Arnie's Place, or anything like that. Mostly in 1992, I'm still working at my other job. I wasn't enjoying my life in my hometown anymore. I was getting more and more frustrated by things that were happening, not only to me, but around me. And after thinking about it, and after a couple of not very good things happening to me in this year, this is when I decided to make the move and leave my hometown, because nothing was working for me down here, or in Bridgeport, I should say. The summer of 1992, I went to Melbourne, Florida, and then stayed with some friends that I had made online a couple of years before. And when I went down there, I just felt better. Life, I guess you could say, in Melbourne, Florida in the early 90s was simpler. I mean, I'm not trying to, insult the place, but yeah, it was, a little bit simpler. The pace of life was nowhere near as fast or as complicated as living in Bridgeport was. I felt a connection to those friends that I had made, and we met face to face at get-togethers in the park, and parties at people's houses and so forth. And that's when I just said, you know what, I think it's time for me to leave the nest. I think I've stayed at home for just a little too long. And if my mother was still alive, may she rest in peace, she would probably have said the same thing. So yeah, that was pretty much where my headspace was going through the year 1992. Okay, getting to the games. Once again, these are in no particular order. I just felt that out of these games that came out in 1992, these were the best that I had played. So here we go. Aero Fighters. I love this game. It's a vertical scrolling shooter. I think SNK licensed it. I want to say Saikyo, which is a game company in Japan. I think they're the ones who made it. I could look it up, but, it's late. I'm lazy. So I'm just going to go by what I remember, whether it be incorrect or not. I liked it because it's another one of those games where you can pick the kind of fighter you want to use, and each one has a different array of firepower, and it gets the job done in a different fashion. Because it wasn't a very long game. I never beat Aero Fighters, but I have seen a video on YouTube of someone who did. I think it was there's a channel on YouTube called Replay Burners, and they get videos from people who either beat a game or put a ridiculously high score on a game that doesn't end, and blah blah blah. And the guy that put up this score, he put up a really good one. I mean, basically it's one of those where you have to beat the game twice, and because you have a selection of, like, I think 4 different aircraft, so there's a lot of replayability with that game. So if you beat the game with one particular pilot in a fight in his fighter, you can come back and pick another one and go the same way. So yeah, Aero Fighters. I mean, it's a really good Japanese shooter. Once again, with most Japanese shooters, I mean, it's not as difficult as some, but which was typical for most Japanese shooters, they would get progressively harder as you complete stages. I mean, by the time you get to like the 3rd or 4th stage in the game, there's a lot of bullet hell aspects to the game. I know that's a modern term for something that's been around in Japanese shooters since probably the 80s or so, but it still works. I like this game. I play it in emulation every once in a while. I haven't been able to find an arcade near me that has a machine, but if I knew of one, I'd play it. Lethal Enforcers. I was never a big fan of this game, but I can see the appeal. It's a rail shooter from Konami, I want to say. As a matter of fact, I've got my name open. Let's take a look. Yeah, Konami. They made it, 1992. Okay. It's basically your stereotypical cop shooter, where you have to shoot all the bad guys without shooting any of the hostages in a particular situation on a screen. The first one is a bank robbery where you have to shoot all of the bad guys without shooting any of the hostages who will pop out from desks or run across the screen and so forth. And it continues on from there. I only played it a few times. I was never really big on rail shooters. I think I've said that, but it wasn't a bad game. It wasn't horrible. It was a live action. It was shot with live action models and so forth. So it's of course the movement of the bad guys and the hostages is stunted because of course this is the early 90s. Motion capture has not gotten to where it is today, 28 years later. But yeah, it wasn't a bad game. It just wasn't my cup of tea. But I put this on the top 10 because anytime I walked into, like, the few times I went to Milford Rec, or a couple of times where I would see it, out in the wild somewhere, people were playing it. So I give it its credit here. Mortal Kombat. What do I have to say? It's Mortal Kombat. It was an evolutionary fighting game in 1992. I mean, of course, when it came out, it immediately was compared with Street Fighter, and the two camps and two ideologies of which game was better started in the arcades, and it only got worse as both of these games got translated into the home sectors. So, I was never really big on Mortal Kombat. By this time, I played Street Fighter 2 so much that it was a major change in the way I played fighting games, and I didn't really want to invest the money to get really good at Mortal Kombat. I was okay with it. I mean, of course, you had it was a fighting game, but the main attraction, of course, was the fatalities, and it was fun to blow up your enemy or reduce him to a skeleton, or to rip his head and his spine out of his body, and so forth and so on. But yeah, it was. I mean, if there's a Mortal Kombat machine and a Street Fighter 2 machine, I'd play Street Fighter. That's just me. I give it its just due and all the respect in the world, but it wasn't a preference of mine. So yeah, Mortal Kombat. I mean, when the Mortal Kombat movie came out in 1994, that remains to me the all-time video game movie translation. Infinitely better than Super Mario Brothers. I mean, light years better than Double Dragon, in almost any other video game movie that came out. Of course, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which came out in 1997, that was not so good. They tried to do too much with that movie, and unfortunately it took away from the genius that was the Mortal Kombat movie. Okay, Outrunners. This is the sequel to Outrun. And with this one, now you have a selection of vehicles to drive along these tracks. And it's like Outrun, it's takes out what Outrun was and takes it up a notch. The turns are sharper. the hill effects are stronger or deeper, should I say? I mean, it basically took from Super Hang On, and it really, took that engine. As it turns out, I've been calling it the wrong name for so long. It wasn't mode 4; it was mode 16, which was, I talk about it in the Sega Genesis um, segment I did in Home Systems. But yeah, so yeah, the graphics are a little cheesier. They're not quite as realistic. That kind of takes away from the game because it's actually a better game than Outrun was, and Outrun was fantastic. It's just they went more cartoony, and it sort of takes away from the game. So yeah, Outrunners, Street Fighter 2, Hyper Fighting, and Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition. Okay, I'll go with Champion Edition first. I mean, hands down, bar none, this is my favorite fighting game of all time. I remember when Crazy 8's Arcade got this game, and I was blown away. I mean, I was already big into Street Fighter 2, but this game was much more, I don't want to say fair, but it was a lot better balanced. I mean, not only could you play the 4 bosses now, and of course I was immediately drawn to Sagat because I've always been a big fan of Thai kickboxing, and of course the movie Bloodsport, or excuse me, not Bloodsport, Kickboxer. The movie Kickboxer had something to do with it as well. So yeah, so I was immediately drawn to Sagat, and he's been my favorite character to play in Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition. When I was playing Street Fighter 2, more often than not, I played with Chun-Li. And I still played with her. I still played with her in Champion Edition, but I got more satisfaction playing Sagat. So yeah, it's basically now, instead of 12 fights, now there are 16. You go through, or excuse me, yeah, 16, because you actually do the Aliax, as my former roommate calls it, which is the mirror image of your own character. You fight that one as well, and it's just one of the best all-time fighting games. Now, Hyper Fighting takes Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition and makes it even, of course, with the Hyper Fighting, there's a speed up, which immediately kind of, kept me away from it because I was too used to fighting in Champion Edition, so I couldn't, I didn't spend the money to kind of upgrade, or not upgrade, but to improve my fighting skills. And with Hyper Fighting, each character came with separate, different attacks. Chun-Li got a fireball, which was interesting. And just there was a lot more action. Of course, it was faster. And, I played it every once in a while, but yeah, Champion Edition is my jam. There's just no getting around it. And ask anybody who knew me back then, they would tell you that. Time killers. What can be said about this game that hasn't been said already? This is a hyper-violent game that really caused a stir amongst the more conservative constituents of our country. It's a very, very violent game where you take one of, I think it's 8 warriors from different areas in time, and you go to defeat the others. Now, what makes it so violent is that if you've got, like, say, a knight with a sword, or a samurai, or a Viking warrior with an axe, you can lop off limbs and things like that. And of course, there's plenty of blood. I mean, this game doesn't hide the fact that it's extremely violent, just like Mortal Kombat didn't do. They didn't hide it either. I mean, in the attract mode, at least with Mortal Kombat, you didn't know that you could, finish somebody and, rip their spine out, or blow them up and leave just a charred skeleton on the ground and things like that. But yeah, Yeah, this game got a lot of flack for being as violent as it was. Total Carnage. Yeah, this one basically took the premise of Robotron and its more or less sequel and made it this cheesy, like ultra hyper 80s kind of movie where you're a soldier trying to rescue reporters and defeat the general. Uh, and yeah, it's so silly. I love the game, but it is so silly. It's ridiculous. Um, of course, it was dual fire control, and you could pick up power ups and things to, uh, you know, uh, increase your score and so forth, and do power up your player. So yeah, Total Carnage. It's about as aptly named as a video game ever could be, especially in that time. X-Men. What can I say about this game? Like Captain America and the Avengers before it, it was a much better beat 'em up. Um, of course, the best machine that you could play would be the 6-player machine. I think I'm trying to remember. Crazy Eights Arcade had an X-Men machine, I think. Milford Rec had an X-Men machine for sure. And I think they had a 6-player one because there was one for 2 players, one for 4, and one for 6. You take one of the X-Men. Of course, which character you took was dependent upon the coin slot that you inserted your coin, your quarter, or your token in. You had, let's see if I can remember all of them. You had Cyclops, Wolverine, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Storm, and I can't remember the 6th one. I think the 6th one was Dazzler. I think that's who it was. And of course, you're trying to defeat Magneto and his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. I mean, it's a great beat 'em up game. Sometimes hard, sometimes unfair, but that's kind of how it was back in the day, especially when it came to beat 'em ups. Like I said, a lot of these games. And I think I did an on the road segment about it, which will be in a future episode, of course, talking about games that turned into quarter eaters. Yeah, they were just designed to get as much money from you as possible. But yeah, I'll leave that alone because I did a whole rant on it. And finally, Grindstormer. This was a game I didn't play until I want to say like the mid 90s, like 95 or 96. I'm trying to remember what arcade had it. I think the Fashion Square Mall arcade in Orlando had it. I think that's where I saw it. But yeah, it's a Japanese shooter, which is, typical of most Japanese shooters, beating boss ships and boss tanks and so forth, defeating a whole bunch of enemy planes and ground targets, that kind of stuff. But I liked it. It just seemed different to me. Where when you picked up your power-ups, you would get like these pods that I forget how you could reposition them on your fighter, but you could reposition them so that you could have a wider arc of fire, or I think you could put them up front so they could absorb enemy projectiles that were aimed at you in that direction, so forth and so on. But yeah, I liked it a lot. It's a fun little shooter. I went back to it recently and I forgot how much fun it is because I hadn't played it in so long. And there's only one game in honorable mentions, and that's G.I. Joe. Of course, being a child of the 70s and 80s, who didn't remember the G.I. Joe cartoon and the G.I. Joe comic book and action figure series before then? G.I. Joe came out in 1982. Marvel had a good long run with the comic book, I want to say until like 1986, I think. Maybe even longer than that. But to coincide with the comic book, Hasbro put out the G.I. Joe action figures. God only knows I know it because I had a lot of them. As a matter of fact, I still have them. They're in my closet buried somewhere. I never got rid of them. And with this game, it's this 3D um 3D, not isometric, but it is a 3D oncoming game. Everything is in front of you and it coming at you. And you could take one of the Joes. I think each one has slightly different attributes as far as their firepower goes. And you run through these areas and defeat Cobra. That's what it is. You're fighting Cobra, the enemy, the entire time. It wasn't a bad game, but like I said, this is another game that just seemed to be a quarter eater. It just seemed to be the difficulty would ramp up really high, and it would be just so difficult that you couldn't last more than like a couple of minutes before you'd run out of lives, and then you'd be plopping more quarters or tokens in. So yeah, there were a lot of games that kind of left me a little disillusioned, left me a little cold, if you will, about arcade video games in the early 90s. But yeah, this was one of them. But I mention it here because it was actually when you could actually play it and you got actually good at it, which of course required quite a bit of a investment. It was a passable game. I do have to say that. So yeah, G.I. Joe. And those are my top 10s. If you were going to arcades back in 1992 and one of your favorite games is not on this list, hey, tell me about it. I'll revisit it and we'll talk about it. arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Okay, let's go on to time for some Stragedy.
I'll be damned. What happened? Good bad tactics, Mr. Ryan.
Oh, I never should have doubted you, boy!
There's a plan in everything, kid. And I love it when a plan comes together.
Hey, it's about time for me to employ a little tragedy.
Time for some Stragedy, Ms. Pac Man. Now, I know that I did a Are You Experienced for Ms. Pac Man way back, I think in like episode 5 or something like that. You'll have to forgive me, I'm in my car, so I don't have all of my information at hand, or at least I can't get to it without putting myself at risk, which I'm not going to do. Full disclosure, I'm at work, driving my route, and this just came to mind while I was driving around and thinking about Ms. Pac Man while I was driving. So here we are. As the Wikipedia page said, if I'm not mistaken, they've randomized some of the ghosts' patterns when they first come out of their home on each maze, and usually that's Blinky and Pinky. Those are the two that sometimes they'll come out and they'll just go almost literally anywhere. Every so often they will do the 4 corners, which means pretty much every ghost in a corner of the maze before they do their first reversal. That meaning they're moving around, then all of a sudden they'll reverse their field, and then they'll start coming after you. Usually I take that time, of course, playing a regular Ms. Pac Man is radically different than playing a Hyper Ms. Pac Man, of course. I mean, with Hyper Ms. Pac Man, you have such a speed advantage that, it's ridiculous that half the time, unless you're just not paying attention, that if you lose lives, it's because you meant to go up. You're going, say, right or left, and you mean to go up, and you miss the turn, and you run right into a ghost, or sometimes you trap yourself, which I've done on a Hyper Ms. Pac Man. So let's break it down. like I said, of course, you've got Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Sue. And I think it goes like this. Blinky will always chase after you and try to take the most direct route to you. Pinky will do that sometimes, but every once in a while he'll try and trap you. Inky is the exact opposite. Sometimes he'll chase after you, but most of the time he'll try to move ahead, in the direction you're going, or try to figure out a way to cut off your avenues of escape. And then Sue is completely random, which can work to your advantage if you've got the bravery to do so. So, like I said, most of the time, it happens more often as you progress through the mazes and you go through acts 1, 2, and 3. Usually, like I said, they'll go out of their home as you're eating dots, and then they'll either go to the four corners, or sometimes Blinky and Pinky will go to a different part of the maze, and they'll do their run around before the first reversal. What I usually do, especially in the first two mazes, the first four mazes. Take that back. Was it cherry, strawberry, peach, pretzel, and apple? First 5. Okay. This is always a pro tip. Always in the beginning of a maze, when you start, try to take care of the problem areas first. The problem areas are these sections of the maze where there's only one way in and one way out. And if you linger in these areas, the ghosts will surround you, trap you, and you'll lose a life. You always try to take care of them first. Sometimes depending on how Pinky and Blinky, where they go, sometimes you may not be able to do it. But it's always a good idea to take care of these areas first. And of course, as you're eating dots, the fruits will come out. Grab them if you can. Don't try to eat too many dots while one fruit is out, because you'll miss the second one. So the best way to do it is to just try to not make a beeline for the fruit when it comes out, but if you're in the vicinity, try and grab it as quickly as possible without trapping yourself by the ghosts. That's harder in a normal speed Ms. Pac Man as opposed to a hyper speed, but there it is. And then once you take care of at least most of the problem areas, then you want to start trying to lure the ghosts to a particular side of the maze and towards where you're going to go for your power pellets, be it upper and lower left or upper and lower right. It all depends. I think there's a way you can actually run the maze to where you can lure the ghosts into one particular spot, and it's like completely natural. You're not breaking off of a quote-unquote pattern in order to go to a power pellet to lure them there. One of the things that I would do, and one of the things I learned early on when I first started playing this game in 1981, is that the best way to lure the ghosts in the first two mazes, the easiest way to lure them in is to use the tunnel, which is basically or tunnels, I should say. The first maze has 4 tunnels. The easiest way to do that is to use the 4 tunnels to lure them in. And that means just kind of chilling out in right near the top left or the top right tunnel, and using that to lure them to one side of the maze. You don't want to let them get too close to where they follow you through the maze or through the tunnel to get to the other side of the maze, even though when they go into the tunnel, they slow down quite a bit. So what you want to do is, as soon as you've got pretty much all 4 ghosts on one side of the maze, you want to make a beeline to one of the power pellets be the upper or lower side. Stay there until they're almost upon you, then eat it, then chase them down. With Ms. Pac Man, they also are they can be evasive, to where if you're chasing them in a line and there are avenues for them to go to try to escape you, they'll try to take it. If you're chasing like multiples in a line, one will take that way to get out, the other one will continue to force you to make a choice to chase them down. I mean, of course, with a hyperspeed Ms. Pac Man, you know, especially on the first 4 mazes, you have pretty much all the time in the world to chase them down and eat them. So after you eat them, you make a beeline for the next power pellet. Stay there, let them converge on your location, eat the power pellet, chase them down. Same thing. All 4. And then, you know, finish whatever dots are left in the maze and get off of it. Don't mess around. Okay, I'm at a stop, so I need to pause this. I shall return. Okay, I'm back. Alright, second maze is the same thing, except the ghosts get a little more aggressive, and I don't remember how many dots it is, but I think once you consume more than, say, 2/3 of the dots in the maze, Blinky starts speeding up. And that's going to be how it is for the rest of the game. He starts moving faster than the other ghosts, and he gets more aggressive with his movements. So it's pretty much the same thing, except for the strawberry, which is 200 points, and the duration of the power pellets turning the ghost purple or blue, like a purplish blue to me. I could be colorblind, but I don't think so. The duration is slightly shorter. And it's the same exact thing. Take care of the problem areas first. You know, there's one particular problem area at the top of the screen in the first maze, which is a classic ghost trap area. So you want to take care of that and eat all of those dots in that area before the first reversal hits. There is a second reversal. I should have mentioned that. I don't remember how long it is, but it's about, oh goodness, I want to say another minute, maybe minute and a half after the first reversal. Then once that's done, then it's like, you know, it's game on. It's a free-for-all. Let's see. Yeah, like I said, Blinky gets faster once you consume a certain amount of dots in the maze. And then, starting with the peach stage, going through the pretzel stage, and then the apple stage, Blinky has like another gear. So I think it's like 2/3 of the dots in the maze is the first one where he speeds up. And then I think it's 3/4 or something like that where he speeds up again, where he gets really fast. I mean, the speed which he moves, especially if you're playing a normal speed Ms. Pac Man, yeah, that he's really, really dangerous at that point. Like the Wikipedia said, that because they send the ghosts, you know, sometimes go to a certain section of the maze seeming almost at random, you know, it sort of negates the need to memorize patterns. Even though my pattern is, like I've been saying, you take care of the problem areas first, and then you go from there. And, you know, it's the first 4 screens you shouldn't get through. I mean, if you're with a little practice, you can get through the first 4 screens without losing a life. You know, once you get through the cherry, the strawberry, the pretzel, and the the cherry, strawberry, peach, and pretzel stages without losing a life. With the pretzel stage, Well, let me break down the blue maze, because there are a lot more problem areas to take care of. My quote-unquote pattern is to go left from the starting point and up to the first problem area, which is like this one long, twisty section of the maze where there's only one way in and one way out. So that's a classic area for the ghost to trap you in. I mean, I've had that happen more often than I care to admit while I was learning how to play the game. I take care of the one on the left first, and then I come back around and start going up towards the top, and I take care of the two big time problem areas of the blue maze, which are just above the ghost's home. One is this long and twisty section, again, one way in and one way out, and then on the top of that there's another one that kind of looks like the area in the first maze, same kind of thing, and I try to get those taken care of before anything else, and I start going ghost hunting, so to speak. Once you get those areas taken care of, you want to take care of that one problem area on the right at one point or another, but the peach stage, the timing of the timing of the ghosts turning blue is a little shorter. The pretzel stage is shorter about the same, if not maybe a second or two shorter, and then the apple stage is much shorter. I think it's basically like 5 to 7 seconds or something like that. I've got Score how to beat the top 16 video games, and the author of that breaks it down to where he has how long the ghosts stay blue, what's the maximum amount of points you can earn in a particular maze, and what the average is for points on those mazes. I mean, it's really, really, I like the way he broke it down. It's really interesting to read. And it also kind of gives you something to shoot for once you've got the confidence and knowledge to go for it. Okay, so the 3 blue mazes, same kind of thing. I think with the pretzel stage, that's when Blinky gets that extra gear after you consume like 3/4 of the dots in the maze. He kicks into another gear and he gets really fast, really aggressive. Just try to avoid getting trapped, and try to get as many points from the ghost as you can. This is where from the pretzel onward until you get to the pear stage, which I'll talk about in a minute, from that point you just want to eat as many ghosts as is feasible, not what you think you can do, because this is when you get greedy, they can change back to their normal forms and you can lose a life because you're just about to eat one and then they turn back and you're done. I still suffer from that from time to time. But starting with the pretzel stage, unless you have them like right there, I would not advise chasing more than 3 of them. And then in the apple stage, I wouldn't suggest chasing more than 2 unless they are like all like right there, like right on the line. And you can get them within the 2 to 3 seconds that they, or not 2 to 3, the 3 to 5 seconds that they will be vulnerable. So once again, same thing. Take care of the problem areas first, and then try to, lure the ghosts in as close as possible, get as many points as you can, and finish the stage. Don't screw around, especially if you're playing a normal speed Ms. Pac Man. If you're playing a hyper speed, you can mess around for a little while, but there's really no point to it if you've eaten all the power pellets and you've gotten as many points as you can. Just finish the maze and get on with it. After the apple stage is Act 2, which is called the chase. And I should say that after the second iteration of the first maze, you have they meet, where Pac Man and Ms. Pac Man meet. They're immediately attracted to each other. And then with Act 2 is the chase, where they're basically chasing each other around in sort of this, I would say, a Pac Man mating ritual. It's kind of funny to me. Now you start in with the third maze, which can be really tough. Right away, just below your starting point is a major league problem area. And every game of Ms. Pac Man I play, when I get to this stage, I immediately take care of it, so I don't have to mess around in that area for the rest of the rest of my time in that maze. I immediately take care of it. It's a long, twisting tunnel that doubles back on itself. But yeah, if you go in there, you're going to get trapped. That's just how it is. Every once in a while, which would really irritate me and mess with my head a little bit, every so often, I don't know how often it is, but Blinky will go down there. Once he comes straight out of his home, or it comes up, he starts at the top of his home. The other three ghosts are in the house, so to speak. Blinky will come straight down, and he'll go in there while you're trying to clear it out. And I've been so irritated by that, because that screws up my pattern. Basically what it is, I take care of that problem area, then once I come back up out of that tunnel, I go to the right and go up near where the tunnel is. The major difference between this maze and the other three mazes is this one only has two tunnels, one on the left, one in the upper left, one in the upper right. And you can only, starting with, I think, the pretzel stage, when ghosts go into the tunnel, they don't slow down anymore. So when they go in and they're chasing you, they're going full speed. So you have to remember that when it comes to the pair stage. Same thing. There's a problem area at the very top center of the maze, and usually I go right to that place and I eat those dots in that area, so I don't have to go there again either, unless I absolutely have to. After that, I come back, I go across the top of the stage, come over. By the time I get to close to the problem area, when I'm clearing it out, the pair will come out. The pair, of course, is worth 2,000 points. Then, if I'm playing hyperspeed Ms. Pac Man, I will make a beeline for it. If I'm playing normal speed, I'll kind of work my way around to it, and then I'll eat it. And then the lower left and the lower right portions of the maze where the power pellets are, there's like two paths and dots down there, so you got to clear some of those out before the ghosts converge on your position. Once you eat the power pellet, the time that the ghosts remain blue is almost, it's like 1 or 2 seconds short of how it is on the first maze. So you have a little time, but usually I will just chase them down and eat them all. I try to get maximum points on this stage. So after you do that, or at least you get all the ghosts that are close to you, go back, clear all the dots out of that problem area, because even though there are 2 ways to get in and out of that area, the ghosts are really good at splitting up and trapping you. There have been a couple times where they've done it perfectly, where one ghost will come in from the top of that area, one ghost will come in and go to the first ledge, and the third ghost will go down to the next ledge, so you have literally no way out unless you have a power pellet there. Okay. Same thing, Blinky gets faster. I think he reaches his max speed either on this stage or the banana stage. It's either apple, pear, or banana. I cannot remember which. I'm doing this straight off of the top of my dome, straight off of memory, so I may be wrong about some things. but I'm doing the best I can, of course. Okay, I'm pulling into a stop, so I'm going to pause it here. I shall return. Okay, I'm back. So, yeah, like I said, there's a lot more to worry about in this stage. And as far as getting trapped by the ghosts. Moving on, same maze. Now it's the banana stage. Now, you know, it's the same thing. Take care of that one area at the bottom center first. Then watch Blinky and Pinky. And, you know, where they go kind of dictates where you should go. If they're going towards the upper right area of the maze, which is where you'll be heading, when you come out of that one problem area and you're heading up the right side of the maze. What you want to do then is just go through the tunnel to the left side of the screen and try to eat as many dots in the left side of the screen as possible before they do their first reversal. Now the banana will come out. The banana is worth 5,000 points. Make sure you eat them. You know, and that's going to be, well, I'll get to it. Same kind of things, except now, depending on the difficulty level the machine is set at, because I've seen on the first banana stage, when you hit the power pellet, the ghost will stay vulnerable for like 5 seconds. And I've also seen it where they'll be vulnerable for like 2 seconds or 2 or 3 seconds, something like that. It all depends on difficulty level. So as you're, you know, like I said, same exact things, take care of problem areas, try to eat as many ghosts as you can without endangering yourself, avoid getting trapped, same kind of thing. Then after, let's see, banana, then I think 2 more mazes after that, same exact thing, wash, rinse, repeat. All you gotta do is just, like I said, pay attention to where Pinky and Blinky are going at the beginning of the maze and act accordingly. And at the 3rd banana stage, you want to be careful because the ghost will only stay vulnerable for like 2 to 3 seconds, even if that. So you got to really be careful about that. Usually at this point, unless they're like very, very close to me and I can eat at least 3 of them without endangering myself, I will just eat the power pellet and just try to finish out the maze. Then after the 3rd banana stage comes Act 3, which is Junior. So that basically tells me that Pac Man and Ms. Pac Man have gotten together, gotten married, because here comes the stork with baby Pac Man, or Junior Pac Man, if you will. Which of course, made 2 spin-offs almost at the exact same time. No, not at the exact same time. Junior Pac-Man, or Baby Pac-Man came out in 1982. Junior Pac-Man came out in 1983. So those were the 2 sequels born off of that. So now you're in the blue maze. And this one's a little tricky. Usually what I do while I'm paying attention to Blinky and Pinky, I go to the left side of the stage, come back around to the bottom left, and then go up the right side of the maze and try to take care of the major problem area, which is almost the entire top level of the screen. There is a little turnaround area literally right above where the ghost's home is, and that's the hardest area to clear out, unless of course the ghosts are being obliging with their movements before the first reversal. This one, I think the duration of the power pellets turning Ghost vulnerable is about the same as the Peach stage. So you've got probably about, I'd say probably about 6 to 8 seconds to take care of the ghosts. So you can actually rack up some points here. And also, speaking of points, now from this stage forward, the fruits that come out are completely random. And this, almost more than anything else, what fruits come out from this stage forward determines what your score is going to be, because that's going to be the major source of your points, especially once you get past get to the third blue stage, which would trigger the second junior intermission. But I'll get there in a second. Like I said, the best thing to do is to clear out the problem areas, lure the ghosts in, eat as many as you can, and clear out the dots as quickly as possible. This is where playing a hyperspeed Ms. Pac Man really starts to come into its own, because you can use the speed of your Ms. Pac Man as a massive advantage. I mean, even more so than the other three mazes. Because there are so many, in this one, there are so many ways to get trapped, and you can even get trapped in the tunnels most often. You know, if you're messing around on a particular side of the maze, the ghosts start converging on it before you go into the tunnel to go on the other side of the maze. Some of them will actually enter in on the opposite side, and of course you'll have ghosts chasing you from your point of entry, so you end up getting trapped and killed. You know, there have been times, I don't know how it happens, but I want to say maybe out of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of times I've played Ms. Pac Man since 1981, there are some times where you go into a tunnel and you go, and a ghost is coming at you from the other side, and you will come out the other side and not lose a life. I think out of the thousands of times that I've played Ms. Pac Man, I think that's happened maybe like 3 to 5 times. And each time it shocks me, you know, to the core, because I'm like, what? Why am I not dead? And then it takes me a couple of seconds to kind of gather my wits and continue to play, because it's such a boggle. So, like I said, with the blue tunnels, there are 4 tunnels, but it's basically they're right on top of each other in the center of the maze. And that's a good way to lose ghosts who are chasing you, is to go into like a top or a bottom one on one side of the maze, then turn right around and go on the bottom one, you know, and go back, double back the way you came, except now you're on the bottom tunnel. And half the time the ghost will just completely lose you, and you're able to escape, you know, a possible trap. But they will trap you in the tunnels if you linger too long. Let's see. Second blue stage. Now it's the same exact thing, except now the power pellet duration is only like 1 to 2 seconds. I think it's like 2 seconds. And now you basically want to lure Blinky towards the power pellets every time and eat him, because he represents the biggest threat by far. You know, yeah, you can get caught by any of the other 3 ghosts, but as long as you kind of try to think 1 or 2 steps ahead as to where you're going and where the ghosts are going to try to catch you, you know, yeah, you can pretty much evade most traps. Now that's the hardest part about learning how to master Ms. Pac Man, is that learning and knowing where the ghosts are going to go and anticipating their movements and acting accordingly. That's the real criteria for mastering this game. Because once you do this, you can pretty much play indefinitely as long as you don't, you just don't get yourself in bad situations. Easier said than done, especially once you get to the last blue maze. Depending on the difficulty setting, this is where it starts getting really hard, because now when you eat a power pellet, all it does is reverse the ghost's field. If one of them's behind you and chasing you, once you eat a power pellet, they will reverse field and go the opposite direction. At this point, you really have to just go for clearing the maze as quickly as possible. Clear the problem areas. Now, basically, you go for power pellets, eat them immediately, as long as there's no ghosts, in front of you. And just kind of keep an internal clock as to when the second reversal is. Because there have been times playing this game where I've cut it way too close, and I'll hit a power pellet to reverse them, but it's right at the time when they do their second reversal, and they reverse back on me and kill me. That was really frustrating. That was a real frustrating part of the game. Okay, after the third blue stage, now it goes back to the previous set of mazes, except now the maze is pink. And same thing, with the first one, I think the ghosts are vulnerable for, 2 to 4 seconds, something like that. 2 to 4, 3 to 5, something like that. But at this point, unless you're really, really good and really, really confident in your game, I wouldn't advise trying to lure them in and chase them down and eating them all, even though it does give you points. The only thing I would do is, lure them in to just kind of get them all in one particular area. Try to eat Blinky after eating a power pellet. Try to eat Blinky if you can to keep him off the board, at least for the 3 to 5 seconds it's going to take for his eyes to get back to the house and for him to regenerate and come back out and chase you, pretty much, at regular speed, accelerated speed, and, third gear, as I like to call it. Then after that, then all of the monsters just reverse field when you eat a power pellet. So now it's basically just going through going to each quadrant. Each quadrant of power pellet is, eat that power pellet and eat all the dots in that maze and get out of there. Because they'll reverse field, but they'll only stay reversed for so long before they start moving and start trying to converge on your position. And this is where it's more of a pattern than anything else, even though randomized movement by Pinky and Blinky at the beginning of the stage sort of dictates where you're going to go. So, and it just continues on from there. Like I said, the majority of your points is going to be from whatever fruits come out. And like I said, they're completely random, because I've had games where I've gotten nothing more point value than a pretzel, which is 700 points. It's all, most of the time it's cherries, strawberries, and peaches, and pretzels. And there have been other games I've played where it's been nothing less than an apple. It's been apples, pears, and bananas. And like I said, that dictates your score. So, it just basically comes down to doing what you can to take care of the problem areas, and then running the power pellets, clearing the area out, moving on to the next area, stopping, what you're doing long enough to eat the fruits, especially if they're high point value, like say an apple or higher, that is worth breaking off of your pattern, quote unquote, long enough to chase it down and eat it. Anything less than a peach, I wouldn't even bother. If it's a peach, like I said before, I'll kind of work my way over to where it's going, and I'll eat it then. But if it's a cherry or strawberry, I'm just not going to bother. The only other thing I would do is eat them just so that when you eat 3/4 of the dots in the maze, you eat the 3/4 of the dots in the maze, the second fruit comes out, and or what is it, is it 2/3? It's like 2/3 or something like that, where now Blinky's speeding up, but the second fruit comes out, and if it's anything lower than a pretzel, I wouldn't even bother, because at this point you've got all 4 ghosts chasing after you, or 3 ghosts and 1 completely random chasing you and trying to trap you, and it's not worth chasing after a strawberry on these higher level mazes. And basically it's just wash, rinse, repeat until you lose all your lives, or if you're good enough, you crash the game. Let's see, my highest score in normal speed Ms. Pac Man is about 180,000 points, somewhere around there. A high score with a hyper Ms. Pac Man. A regular hyper Ms. Pac Man, my high score is somewhere over like 250,000 or something like that. The arcade in Brighton has a hyper Ms. Pac Man, like I've said 1,000 times on this show, with a really funky scoring setup. It's like 25 points per dot. I think it's like 100 for a power pellet, and the ghosts, as you eat them, it's 200, 400, 800, 8,000. So that's where you get the majority of your points if you can lure the ghosts in. And sometimes it's worth taking a risk to chase that 4th ghost down. But yeah, sometimes your greed gets the better of you, and you end up killing yourself doing it. So yeah, with that particular machine, my high score is like 858,000 points. I set that score like 2 weeks ago at the arcade in Brighton. I mean, it's a fun machine to play, and it's just fun just to watch, to see how high of a score you can get. So those are my tips on Ms. Pac Man. Those are my strategies. If you have any questions, you have any tips, tricks of your own that you wish to share with the listening audience, by all means, get a hold of me at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com, or you can leave a voicemail. That is 734-743-2433.
And finally, buckle in, folks. We're going on the road.
Hey folks, Brian here, back on the road. To catch you guys up to speed, I don't know if I explained anything in episode 9, which is currently out, but basically I was out of work for about 2.5 months, and running face first into my credit limits while doing so. But I'm gainfully employed now. I think things are looking up. So here I go again on my own, going down the only road I've ever known. Sorry, had to do it. Anyway, what inspired me to do this on the road segment is I'm currently driving up Interstate 75 right now in the downriver section of Michigan, and I have a good 21 minutes before I reach my stop, so why not? But the real inspiration was, while I'm driving up the highway, I saw someone pulling a trailer and it had the website Brad's Arcades on it. And this guy is a buy, sell, repair arcade and pinball machine business. And I was like, you know what? That is really cool. This is another sign, at least to me, that arcades are still on the comeback. A couple of weeks ago, I was looking for arcades to visit and review. God only knows when I'm going to get to them, because I've got to spend the next several months digging myself out of the debt hole that I found myself in. But I'm going to go to these places. I think I listed like 5 or 6. Put them on a Word file on my computer to be accessed later. But there are at least 3 arcades / barcades in downtown Detroit as we speak. You know, the day being the 5th of April. And there are a couple of places in the Metro Detroit area that I'm curious about, that I'm going to check out. And there were at least another 3 or 4 places in the Metro Detroit area that they call them arcades, but it's at least 75 to 85% ticket games. And I mean, I've spoken my mind about ticket games before. You know, I understand why they do it. And, you know, it's a good way to earn money, and it's a good way for kids and their parents and, you know, other people to feel like they're getting a possible return on the investment of playing all these ticket games, which is fine. It's not for me, but it's fine. You know, I mean, that's my main complaint with Pinball Pete's. Too many ticket games. Too many. They need more classic stuff, and it needs to be less expensive, but I've ranted about that too, so I'm going to leave that alone too. So, I mean, just seeing places. As a matter of fact, when I was being trained on the route that I have now, he pulled over at a Rite Aid in, I want to say it's like Eastern Livonia, Western Farmington Hills, that area. I can't remember exactly the intersection, but there was a Rite Aid on the top part of the building, which was, you know, pretty much level with the street, and then there was an incline towards the back of the building, and on the bottom floor was a arcade game store. You know, sold pool tables, pinball machines, arcade video games. And and that is encouraging to me. I mean, I've always felt, just by going on a couple of forums like Atari Age and oh goodness, there's another one I frequent, which name I've completely forgotten, but and going on various classic video game and arcade video game groups on Facebook, I always felt that the arcade was starting to make a comeback. And here it is, 2019. I mean, the classic the classic era of video games was more or less a 5 to 6 or 7 year span, starting in 78 and culminating with the crash of 83. Even though in 1983 arcades were still doing good business. I mean, the ramifications of the crash really didn't seriously start until 1985, when the the Nintendo Entertainment System came out in the United States, and that really started the decline for arcades. But so you could say it's a 7-year span. Me personally, I'd say it's arcades didn't seriously start declining until probably about 1986, I'd say 87. I think 87 is when they seriously started to decline. From 87 to, I'd say probably 1990, that 3-year span, I saw almost all of my favorite arcades shut down. Trumbull Mall Arcade closed in, I think, 88 or 89. Let's see. Actually, I take that back. Yeah, I think it was 88, because I got my job in the mall in 1990. So I think the arcade closed in 89. I'm pretty sure it was 89. If anybody out there knows the exact date, or at least the exact year, drop me a line at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com. Let me know. Or get a hold of me on Facebook, or Twitter, or Tumblr, Instagram, however you do your social media. I usually have a presence there. But anyway, me personally, yeah, I think the real death of the arcades started in probably about 1989 or 88, and just went all the way through. Because, let's see, Trumbull Mall Arcade closed down, Spanky's moved and was a shell of its former self. Let's see, what else? The Connecticut Post Mall Arcade, I think, shut down. Although it was going to be resurrected later as Tilt, which is in another part of the mall. As I found out, I think in like 1990 or 91, somewhere in there. Milford Rec was still going along, but I know they were hurting. But by this time, they had diversified enough that it was more of a pure entertainment center, rather it being an arcade. I mean, by 1989, 88, 89, 90, they had batting cages. They had they had bumper cars. They had rides. They had a legitimate children's area, which did have a couple games in it, but that was more for kids' birthday parties. They had the Nathan's hot dog place in there. So they diversified enough, but still stayed in their lane, so to speak, enough to where, they weren't relying 100% on arcade machines. Because when I went back in 2001, I borrowed my cousin's car, and I basically went and, visited my best friend. We hung out for several hours. I just went to Milford Rec just to see if it was still there, and it was. But, it wasn't doing anywhere near the business as it was when I was a kid, which was unfortunate. And of course, it finally shut down for good and got demolished in 2005, which is unfortunate. I wish somehow, some way it could have held on, but then again, it would have had to hold on for another 10 to 12 years, because I think arcades didn't really seriously start making a comeback till probably about 2015 or 2016. I mean, there were arcades around, but I think arcades like Fun Spot in New Hampshire and Galloping Ghost in Chicago, they kind of showed the way in that you can have an arcade and it can make really decent business, at least enough to break even and keep the lights on and keep the games going and pay the employees at the very least. You know, and this is how you do it. Instead of it being token driven or quarter driven, you do the free play option. You pay a flat fee, you can stay in there as long as you like, and you can play until your hands fall off, if you're so inclined. So, for a place like Milford Rec, yeah, I think especially when the economy took a crap in 2007, well, even the economy took a crap in 2007, but the economy was kind of on the decline through the early 2000s. You know, pretty much ever since 2003, I want to say, when, you know, we decided to go over to Afghanistan. And things just started going downhill from there. I mean, it all culminated with the banks being quote-unquote too big to fail. And, you know, all of a sudden billions and billions of dollars are just gone. People's retirement funds are just vapor now in the air. And, you know, the economy took a crap. You know, that was 2007. So I don't think if Milford Rec had still tried to hold on, I don't think it would have made it through the recession. I don't think there was any way possible. But just for argument's sake, or just for, you know, just for flight of fancy or for craps and giggles, whatever term you want to use, I mean, if they were able to make it through all that and get to the era of, I want to call it a renaissance, I can't quite bring myself to do it yet, but when I go to places like the Arcade Brighton, and they're doing pretty serious business every night. I mean, I went to the Arcade Brighton, 2 weeks ago? Yeah, or was it a week ago? Was it that last Sunday? No, it was 2 Sundays ago. I took my godson up there, and, you know, we made a day of it. You know, just as an aside, you know, nothing different, nothing to write home about, really. I just, you know, had some fun. I didn't put up any serious scores or anything like that, which is why I didn't do a segment about it. But like I said, to my point, arcades like Galloping Ghost, which is now like what? How many machines now? Like 708, 709, or something like that. You know, they showed the way. Pay this amount of money. You can play as long as you like. You know, you can even leave the arcade, go get something to eat, you know, take a break and come back and play more if you want. And it's awesome. I mean, you know, the Arcade in Brighton, you know, whether it was me or whether it was something they saw, you know, like Doc Mack, who runs Galloping Ghost, who, by the way, for those who don't know, he just opened up a pinball arcade. And apparently that's doing, you know, serious business, because it's just all pinball machines. You know, so Doc Mack, who runs the Galloping Ghost Corporation, and at this point is becoming a corporation with all the interests he has, I don't know why he hasn't just straight up bought the town of Brookfield right now. And I even said it I even said it in a comment on Facebook. I said, if I had a guaranteed job, I'd move to Brookfield, Illinois. I would. I mean, it's my dream to own an arcade, and for a lot of people who, you know, for those who are listening, those who are of an age with me, you know, say like from 38 to like, say 55, you know, and who loved video games when they were kids, and they were around for all of the things that went down in the 80s and into the 90s and so forth, you understand. I mean, to me, that would be my dream. If I had the money, I think I'd probably need close to $5 million to pull it off. You know, to get the site, maybe an existing building, but it'd probably have to be built up, you know, to find the right place, because that is where that arcade will make or break it. You know, it's location, you know, number one, and of course having the proper facilities for it, number two, and then having the games, number three, and then hiring the right staff to run it, number four. Those are like paramount in running a good arcade. Speaking of that, yeah, I think the guy in the arcade said that he was going to hire some people for that place. That's interesting. That tells me they're really doing good business. Because when I lost my job I quit my previous job in December because I had an opportunity somewhere else and it didn't work out. I just went up to the arcade one day on a lark, and I asked the guy if, they had any positions. At the time they didn't, but now that's changed, which is very interesting. But that's the key. You have to have a good spot to where it is, as to where the arcade is. You have to have a good staff to run it. You've got to have the games, and your percentage of games that work properly against those that don't has to be at least 95%, because that's what makes or breaks an arcade as well, is that your machines, and I know it's tricky because you're dealing with 20, 30, in some cases 40-year-old machines that you're trying to keep going. And just from watching John's Arcade, where he's fixing machines, he's constantly fixing machines, because his basement is like a full, a decent sized arcade now. I think his game total is somewhere in the 30s, probably 40s, maybe even 50. But, a decent sized arcade has to have at least 30 machines, maybe more. I mean, a good arcade like Milford Rec had over 100 at the peak, at the height of its powers. Galloping Ghost is the world's biggest arcade at over 700 machines. God, I think about maybe next year in 2020, once I think my situation stabilizes, I'm going to have to take a vacation out there. I'm going to have to go out to Chicago, hang out with Jack Danger, hang out with Greg Hansen, go to Galloping Ghost, meet and or interview Doc Mack, because that's one of the things I want to do. God bless Greg Hansen. He's probably going to be the first interview for my podcast. God bless him, because the guy he's always been cool. Ever since I met him on Twitch, we talked a little bit, and I got to know him a little bit. I don't know him well at all, but at least to me, Greg's younger than me, but Greg is one of those dudes who I would have just always wanted to hang out with at an arcade, like my friend Mark, because I was always hanging out with Mark. You know, because Mark was cool, and Greg seems like he's the same kind of guy. You know, he's really cool. You know, he knows his stuff. You know, he's a video game master in his own right. And he, you know, I'm looking forward to doing that interview, which reminds me, I need to DM him on Instagram and ask him, you know, when a good time is. And then I have to do my homework. I've got to get the questions. I think I know how that interview is going to go, because, you know, one of us is going to start reminiscing, and then one of us is going to say, oh, I remember that. Do you remember this? Oh, I remember that. And we're just going to go off and, you know, be off and running and have a really good conversation. I want to do it Joe Rogan style, but I'm nowhere near as good at that as Joe Rogan. I mean, Joe Rogan is a comedian first, before anything else. Before he's a UFC commentator, before he's a podcaster, he's a comedian. So he already has the leg up socially. You know, he's really good at having conversations and asking questions during the conversation, and it doesn't sound so much like an interview. You know, and I want to do the interview with Greg in that kind of style. Hopefully it comes off. Stay tuned. So, getting back to my whole point. A good-sized arcade has to have at least 30 games. You know, if you're going to call yourself an arcade, you have to have at least 30. And you just go up from there. I mean, Fun Spot's one of the world's biggest. You know, Galloping Ghost is the biggest, even though there were tons of people in the beginning who, you know, kind of poo-pooed Galloping Ghost because apparently all their machines weren't working. So, you know, I think Doc and his crew have kind of gotten a hold on that, and now they're going to be doing things like, I forget what they called it, but they're basically going to have it to where they're going to have camera set up so that they can basically stream on Twitch from each machine, rather than the setup they have now, which is basically a camera, tripod, lighting, that kind of stuff. You know, and I mean, that's why I want to talk to Doc Mac, because I'm like, dude, you have to be the most ambitious son of a bitch I know. I mean, as far as, you know, being in the video game arcade business, you've got all of these dreams and all of these plans, and you just execute them. It's one thing to have plans and have dreams. It's another thing to go out and actualize them, you know? But I'm just like, you know, that's why I want to get a hold of Doc Mac and ask him if he'll do an interview for the show, because I'm really, really interested in this. I mean, when it comes down to it, I would love to just interview people in video gaming lore, in history. I mean, I have a short list as it is right now. I want to interview Eugene Jarvis. I want to interview Nolan Bushnell. You know, I want to, you know, just interview all the people who were there during the boom, who were there during the bust, you know, during the crash, the aftermath. What, you know, how did you keep your hand in, and all things like that. I want to do that. I want to interview guys like Doc Mac. I want to interview Jack Danger, you know, even though I know that's going to get silly. I mean, you know, I want to do all these things, you know, and I want to bring it to the people who will appreciate it. You know, all you guys out there who are listening to this podcast, who have, you know, a love and a passion for arcades and video games, you know, that at the very least equal mine, if not surpass it. Okay, I'm at a stop, so I'm going to pause it here. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, I had 3 pickup stops within like half a mile of each other, so I just thought I'd knock them all out before I got back on the mic, so to speak. So now, of course, I've lost my complete train of thought, so I'm going to start again. I mean, I'm hoping that you guys will take the ride along with me. You know, I've got more arcades to go to, I got people to interview, I've got more stories. I mean, I have things planned out all the way out to at least episode 25. I think I probably have enough stuff to go all the way to 50, if not longer. And I'm going to, of course, sprinkle in, you know, reviews. If anything, you know, really big happens in, you know, the world of arcades, it's really newsworthy, of course, you know, I'll report it and I'll put my own little spin on it, you know, my opinions and so forth, because, well, if I'm anything, I'm opinionated. What can I say? So yeah, I mean, I've got a list of people that I want to interview, and I'm hoping that I can get through them and bring that out to you guys, and hopefully, you know, it won't be like every other interview you've heard with these people. I mean, you know, I'm just thinking about the conversation I'm going to have with Jack Danger, which is going to be very interesting, especially if alcohol is involved on any level between the two of us. Because God only knows what'll come out. I mean, I've seen Jack when he's, shall we say, in his cups, and yeah, you know, I love him, but yeah, he has a tendency to overshare when he's drunk, and I think he knows that by now, because I think he's gotten in trouble a couple of times for saying stuff he really shouldn't have said. But anyway, that regardless of that, I mean, I'm looking forward to the conversation with Greg Hansen. That's going to be a good one. I mean, even though he's been interviewed a bunch of times, because he was one of the first people on YouTube to sort of make a series about acquiring video games and putting them in his basement. I mean, he even said it himself. It says it in the intro to his show, Arcade Impossible. You know, he's always dreamed about owning his own arcade. And, you know, with the help of some friends and with the help, you know, and finding good deals. I mean, I still remember him getting a freaking cocktail freaking asteroids machine for $25 because it wouldn't work properly. And basically he and a friend of his basically reseated all the chips on the circuit boards, and it worked. You know, I was like, wow, that's crazy. I mean, considering, you know, that a fully functioning asteroids machine brand new back in 1979 was like $2,000, maybe $3,000. And to get it for $25 and just do a little work with the chips and getting it working, I mean, talk about a bargain. He literally stole that. He might as well have broken in that guy's house and just took it in the dead of the night and brought it home and got it working. Because, you know, yeah, he up and stole that thing. But anyway, and if I ever make my fortune, you know, yes, that's one of the things I want to do. I want to make I want to have an arcade of my own, you know, and have people come to it and play the games and have fun and enjoy themselves, whether they're, you know, little kids or they're borderline old guys like me. Either way, you know, that's what I want. That's what I really want more than anything else. You know, I mean, aside from, you know, seeing my son become, you know, a really good human being, you know, who can think for himself, do for himself, and, you know, be successful in whatever venture he decides to commit himself to, that I think is probably priority one at this point. You know, I mean, me being 50 years old, and there's a lot more years behind me than there are ahead of me. You know, I'm not being morbid, I'm just spitting truth. You know, you start thinking in that way, especially when you have kids. You know, and I had kids late in life. You know, my son was born when I was 45. And, you know, yeah, I just want the best for the kid. So yeah, that's priority one. But I mean, yeah, I would love to run an arcade, you know, as a business, and just bring joy to other people who were there when these games came out, have them relive their childhood a little bit, and then on top of that, I want the future generations to say, hey, we didn't always have Call of Duty 3. We didn't always have Fortnite. We didn't always have World of Warcraft. This is what we had, and it was awesome. And if you don't particularly like classic arcade games, you know, and you're in the younger generations, that's fine. But you damn well better respect it. Because without the games that I grew up with and that I came to love and that I'm pretty passionate about, without those games, you don't have what you have now. Not even close. You wouldn't have Elite Dangerous without Space Invaders. You wouldn't have you wouldn't have I can't even think of a really good modern day shooter. But I mean, you wouldn't have the games you have without what came before it. And just for that reason, you should give respect to what it is, even if you're not going to like it or play it. Quite honestly, you should, because there's nothing more I love than seeing kids who are like, excuse me, you know, 6, 7, 8 years old, you know, in places like Pinball Pete's, in places like the arcade in Brighton, and they're just as excited about these games in the modern day as I was when that was cutting edge gaming technology. And nothing brings a smile to my face more than that. I mean, it's awesome just to see it. And just to see these kids just, enjoying the games and having all kinds of fun. I mean, that's what gives me hope for video game arcades in the future. That's what really gives me hope. And this all started by seeing a guy in his pickup truck, or not in his pickup, in his SUV, driving north on Interstate 75, pulling his trailer, probably got a couple of machines in the back, and he's running a business of sales and repair of classic video games and pinball machines. It's that kind of stuff that gives me hope that at least the history of this genre is not going to begin with EverQuest or World of Warcraft. There is a rich history. I mean, they made several dozen books on the history of video games. I have a few of them. And I remember when I bought those books off Amazon, and I'm sitting there reading them, and I'm like, yeah, I remember this. I remember that. Yeah, this is awesome. And I mean, there was a part of me that just had the fear that as technology progresses, because right now you can pretty much play any of the classic video games, albeit not in most cases legally, some cases not, but you can play them on your cell phone now. I mean, the experience isn't quite there because God only knows cell phones aren't exactly what I would call sharp as far as controls go. But I mean, you can play them on your gaming consoles, and I think that's also part of what's keeping it going, is that, you know, these games are still being put out there. I mean, I was looking at my excuse me, I was looking at my PS2 last night, which is, you know, in my bedroom, and I think I have more games for my PS2 than I had for my Atari 2600. now that I think about it, the only system I had that had more games, and it was by an order of magnitude, was my Commodore 64. You know, the games I had for my Commodore 64 probably numbered in the thousands, 4 digits, you know, and on, you know, floppy disks that are sitting in a container sitting in my closet, you know, and I'm still trying to find a functioning disk drive to, you know, make them work. And bridging a Commodore 64 to your PC is not exactly what I call a easy undertaking. Not even close. But either way, and even now I think about it, you know, Commodore 64 had most of their stuff, you know, put into emulation. You know, I think that's what's keeping these things alive, is that most of these classic systems are being put into but yeah, I was saying about my PS2. And I'm thinking about it. I'm looking at all the anthologies I have. I have the Atari anthology, which has 100, you know, like, I think it's like something like 80 games or something like that, plus, you know, the arcade games, plus the 2600 games, which was awesome. I loved it. That's one of the best anthologies ever put out. I've got Tato Legends 1 and 2. I've got Williams Arcade Classics 1 and 2. You know, because I wanted those games because, you know, I'm an old head when it comes to arcades, or arcade games. I am, and I always will be. I'm not going to be one of these, hey, you whippersnappers who never know what it was like. I'll never be one of those guys, I don't think. At least not. I don't have the age yet. I think when I get up into my 7th or 8th decade, then I have the right to do that. Because God only knows, if I'm 70, 80 years old and I can still get around, I'm probably still going to be going to arcades, you know, just to play X, Y, or Z. But either way, I think those anthologies, because I think it's one of those things that was sold more for the parents of the kid for whom they bought the Xbox 360, you know, the Xbox One, the PS3, the PS4, and what is to come in the future, you know, because every one of those systems has those anthologies, you know, the Sega anthology, you know, like I said, the Atari anthology, you know, the Tato anthology, the Capcom classics 1 and 2. So, and it just keeps going on down the line. I love it. It's awesome because it keeps those games out there. They're not just in an arcade somewhere. They're not just in the back corner of a mom and pop store somewhere. You know, they're still out there. They're still relevant. And it's wonderful to see. I mean, I couldn't be happier because of that. Because it's just wonderful to know that even going to arcades, you know, I see all these young kids playing the classic games, and having fun with them. It's awesome to see. Because there was a time where I thought stuff was just going to fade away into some sort of obscurity, and that was going to be that. Then it was just on to the newest thing. I'm glad that that's not the case anymore. So yeah, I mean, just stay tuned, folks. I mean, I'm going to be, once I get things on a more even keel as far as work and paying bills and things like that, once I get on more even keel and I'm able to actually go out to these places, these places in Detroit and Metro Detroit, and finding these places and finding out what they're all about, yeah, stay tuned. Absolutely, folks. So for now, as I'm running through traffic with idiots on I-75 and trying to keep my company vehicle from getting smashed into pieces, this is Brian signing off, saying good gaming, have fun out there, au revoir.
This has been the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast. All music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his music at incompetech.com. You can contact the show by email at arcadeaddictbrian@gmail.com, or you can call and leave a voicemail at 734-743-2433. Until next time, you have been listening to the Confessions of an Arcade Addict podcast. See you then.